Well, for anyone that's watching us currently, you can see that things are looking a little bit different right now. And if you're just listening, you're about to hear that things are a bit different right now because, as always, my two unreliable co hosts, JP and Christian, JP, who has been gone for some time, still not available, and Christian, who's out of town for the weekend. And just so I wouldn't go crazy talking to myself for a full episode, I decided to call in a favor and ask someone, a good friend of the show, to come on and be my co-host for today. So why don't you introduce yourself?
Just to start, it's been a long time coming here. About year and a half in this guy's ear. Just let me come on, let me come on. It won't hurt. And I'm just blessed that he's finally let me come around. My name is Jesse Calhoun, good friend of Jonah's and his brother who's not here, and Christian who's also not here. About That's about as good of an intro as I'll give for now, and we'll give it back to Jonah.
Jesse is a good friend of the show, longtime fan, probably one of the first people to ever uh,
Long time
know,
listener, first time caller.
probably one of the first people one of the first people that I personally knew to like know that I had a show going on that me and Christian originally kickstarted, and it wasn't too long after he was asking to come on, sort of as a joke, but I could tell that he always wanted to come and hop on. And
The desire was always there. It might not have seemed like it, but
2 years later, and here we are. I've asked him to come and help me out and talk a little bit about the Sabres and a little bit about the crazy NHL horizon, which is about to ramp up even more the next week. Welcome back to another episode of the Sabre Roundtable. My name is Jonah, and as he already introduced himself
and
before,
I'm Jesse. Happy to be
he
here.
he is Jesse. And as always, we'll be talking to you about all things Buffalo Sabres hockey and even a little bit of the wider NHL. Now, Jesse, you are actually lucky. This is actually a perfect time for you to come on an episode. We've gotten probably the biggest Sabres related news, anything, rumor, in a long time, and Christian and JP are not here to talk about it. Consider yourself lucky.
I've stated before. I'm just blessed to be here. Just happy to be here and share my thoughts on the Sabres news.
Well, to jump right into it, Jeff Skinner. Without a doubt, the biggest piece of news to come out recently, something that we probably had never really given thought to, or at least when JP, Christian, and I had gotten together and talked about it, or even just addressed the idea of a possible Jeff Skinner buyout. We just kind of threw it to the side. We never really saw it as a realistic um, option, a possibility, and given that it was you were setting yourself up at face value, you're setting yourself up to take on dead money. It didn't really seem like in the mo of, I guess, a Terry Pagula team, or at least a team that was trying to commit to being financially responsible. But the more you think about it, and the more you dig into what the details of the buyout look like, you see why this is a real possibility, and you're seeing why possibly Jeff Skinner has most likely played his last game as a Buffalo Sabre. It's just sad to see that it's gotten to this point that because this is, Jeff Skinner is still a good hockey player. It's just, can you take on that contract for what he gives on the ice? And it's gotten to the point where the stakes of next season, what they are, they just you can't justify, you maybe just can't justify it from a certain point of view anymore.
He's still good for the team, and he's definitely someone that I wouldn't hate to have around, but I don't think he's $9 million good. And that's where this does seem like something that I'm not for or against it right now because for me at least, I feel like it depends on what they do with the cap space that they're saving. And if they're just buying him out to just get rid of the contract and then they don't really spend any of the money that they're saving, then keeping him around in a third line role possibly, it wouldn't be the end of the world.
You bring up a good point because you might ask yourself, why are the Sabres doing this? You're committing to dead money for the next 5 seasons. Everybody knows what next season is shaping up to be. Everybody knows what the stakes are. Everybody knows what they have to do. And buying him out now gives them an extra $7.5 million to play with in the offseason. And, conceivably, the idea of doing this and gaining that extra cap flexibility, you would hope that they end up spending that money. Now, if they didn't, I I don't know what I don't even want to think about that scenario because then it's just like, what's even the point? But yeah, you feasibly you take that 7 million and you go and get. Obviously you have to replace Skinner now because at the very least he's a middle six forward and has been in their top six for an extended time now, and using that money for another addition if it's in the bottom six, or you're using it in tandem to get a top four addition. So the idea of that getting that extra boost would be to conceivably spend as close to the cap with that extra money.
But then that is also something that I think they have to be careful about because as I just checked Cap Friendly, which I have heard is a good friend of the show, there is, I believe it's 2 years down the line where his cap hit jumps up if we buy out to 6.4, 6.5 around there. And that's definitely something that they have to be careful with when they have to re-sign Quinn and Peterka either the start of this season or if they let them go without extensions and they have to re-sign him next offseason.
Yeah. So to break down, like if they buy him out, because the buyout window is going to open on Thursday. The Stanley Cup's going to be awarded Monday night, no matter what, and then 48 hours later is when the buyout window opens. So on Thursday we'll probably get our answer. Year one is only a $1.4 million cap hit for Skinner's dead money. But then the next 2 seasons is where you see your challenge because it jumps up to $4.4 million in 2025, 2026. And then the big one in 26, 27, it goes all the way up to $6.4 million. And that's hefty. Now, the cap's rising. You're going to be getting more money feasibly in that time from the league, but still $6 million for a player that isn't in your lineup when Quinn's going to need a contract, Peterka's going to need a contract, Byram needs an extension next summer, Levi needs one next summer, and then Alex Tuch is going to need a contract, and that's $6 million that you kind of have to avoid for a full season. But you have to, it goes back to the main point. This upcoming season is really what matters the most. And after that $6.4 million cap hit in 26-27, it's 2.4 for another 3 years. That's not going to kill you in a rising cap world. Who knows what the cap looks like in 2028, 2029.
Yeah, so that just kind of all brings it back to I'd definitely be for it if this move freeing up the round 7.5 is going towards making the team better next season.
Now, something that we discussed, or it would be our go-to response. I know Christian and I talked about it a lot. Is just hold off till next year. Do it next year. Take another season. Find out if he's really not find out if he's not a top six forward anymore, and then buy him out. But you look at what the salary, what the balance looks like if you were to do it in a year's time. It's still a $4 million cap hit in 25-26, and it's still $6 million in 26-27. You still have those 2 big years. So you were never going. If you were always going to buy out Jeff Skinner, you were never going to get out of those 2 big seasons. And then the question becomes, are you a better team with him on your roster heading into next season? Are you willing to take that risk, or are you going to get bit in the ass because you didn't buy him out immediately and maybe go and spend that on a Nikolai Ehlers or Pavel Buchnevich, whoever? And the question's also been raised, why not just trade him? Well,
who's going to take that contract?
Who's going to take that contract? I mean, Hey, maybe Washington would have, given what they just did this previous week. But hey, who's going to want that contract? It's $9 million for 3 more seasons for a forward that is arguably the worst defensive forward in hockey. Um, it's too much. And above all else, he gets to control where he goes. He has the final say. And for anybody that remembers when he got traded here in 2018, he waived a no trade clause to come to Buffalo because he's from the Toronto area. He's close to home. So you think about the teams that could conceivably take him on, say Chicago or San Jose. He's not going to waive to go all the way out west for a team that's once again in a rebuild. I mean, maybe he would play with Connor. Maybe he would want to play with Connor Bedard, but I find that highly unlikely. And it just moves him farther away from home. I mean, when he hits free agency, I will not be surprised if he hits free agency, if he signs with a Toronto or an Ottawa or Montreal. I wouldn't be surprised if he stays in the East. Maybe even Tampa Bay.
Not for 9 million, he won't, dude.
For anybody, well, we did leave that part out. Jesse is a part Tampa Bay Lightning fan.
Well, when you're a Sabres fan and they're not around in the playoffs, I kind of gravitated towards rooting for them in the April to June months the past few years. Yeah,
they've been pretty good. Hey, could be worse. There's a large contingent of Patrick Kane jerseys in this city. You could have gone down that path. So I really haven't gotten into what do I think is right. What do we think is right? Is this correct? Is this the correct decision? And is this a short-sighted? Is this a short-sighted move if they do end up doing it, or is this the smart thing that even maybe you bite the bullet in 25, 26, 26, 27, but you're still able to progress fine. For me personally, I'm for the move, but it's reluctant because I really do. I feel like they're going to struggle to compete in 26, 27, or not struggle to compete, but be the peak of what they can be with that cap hit. I mean, if you think about where you want this team to be in 2 years' time, I know it sounds crazy, but you do want them to start pushing conference finals. You want series wins. Conceivably, if you look at the season over season jump that the New Jersey Devils made with Lindy Ruff, they nearly won the division. They had 110 points, and Carolina just beat them out. Maybe you're pushing for a cup by that time, and it would really, really stink if $6 million of dead cap prevented you from another decent addition.
I've just from our conversation here, I've also kind of been drawn to agree that it would be the right move, but because the dead cap hit would still be less than what they'd be paying him, and given that the guy probably doesn't want to be playing bottom 6 minutes, you probably think that his performance is going to fall off even more than it already has. So you'd still be paying him $9 million if you kept him around. So it does seem like saving the 2.5. It's just something that they have to keep in mind when they're signing all these guys, and that so it doesn't sneak up on them.
And when you're thinking about roster building, placing him in the lineup, he's just not a guy you can have in your bottom 6. He's not big. He doesn't forecheck, and you can't really trust him with defensive zone starts. There's a certain way to play Jeff Skinner, and it has to be in the top 6 with heavy offensive zone usage, giving him offensive zone starts. And when you're building this roster, Peterka's already passed him on the depth chart, and B, his production declined, as we all know, and C, from day one, everybody was pointing to the fit with Lindy Ruff just not lining up. Lindy Ruff teams have famously been heavy on the forecheck. They're quick teams that are going to force you into pressure. I mean, that's what the Devils did so well when they broke out 2 seasons ago. They were relentless on the forecheck, and Jeff Skinner, he doesn't forecheck. He sits back, he waits for, maybe he'll do a clean takeaway, but he's waiting for others to create, and then he's going to find the soft areas. That's where he's going to hurt you. He's going to find the spot on the ice where nobody can cover him. And look, that's why he's an effective forward in the NHL. I'm not saying there's a right or wrong way to play. Jeff Skinner is, playoff jokes aside, like, he is a great player in the NHL, and he's probably going to help a playoff contender wherever he goes. But the fit is just not there with what is lining up to be the 24 or 25 Sabres. And that's something that I think Adams sort of reflected in his press conference on Thursday. This was a pre-draft press conference, but inevitably questions were all over the place. And one of the first ones was about the Skinner rumor, because prior to then, the only reason that we had heard about this in the first place, it was Jeff Marek, Elliot Friedman talking about it out of nowhere, which you always raise an eyebrow at, because if those two start talking about something, it's probably starting to move in that direction. And Adams didn't exactly kill that. Of all the questions he got at that press conference, I think that was the one he avoided, and just said they were open to anything. So they're talking about this, that this is a real possibility. And even one point in his answer about that question, I think he even subtly mentioned that he talked to Terry Pegula about this. So, like I said, this is something that definitely talked about. So yeah, it's unfortunate. Jeff Skinner, without a doubt, one of the most likable Sabres players throughout the drought. Maybe the most likable. I mean, unless your name is Ralph Kruger or Steve Smith, who hates Jeff Skinner? The guy is he's a joy to watch on the ice, especially when he's playing good and he's getting under the team's skin. But he's also an incredibly fun and unique player to watch. It's sad. This tenure deserved to go better if this is really the end. And I can't. He's of all the players that have left Buffalo recently from the droughts, and there's a possibility. One of the drought players is going to be lifting a Stanley Cup come Monday. Jeff Skinner, I really would not. There's literally zero hate placed at his feet. When you talk about guys like Eichel, Reinhardt, even Okposo, they have their, if people who just dislike them or don't want to see them succeed, I just can't. I would never be able to get there with Jeff Skinner. I hope that guy wins a friggin' Conn Smythe. I only wish the best for him.
Yeah, I can't help but agree with that point. Could you say guys like Okposo? I'm one of them. I really don't care to see him win anything, but for sure, if Skinner ever, if they do buy out Skinner, then I'll definitely still be rooting for him wherever he ends up.
It's been a long time. It's been 6 years in Buffalo. It's crazy to think, but it's sad to see. It's sad to see. He's a joy to watch. No more between two stalls. No more.
That's the killer.
No more of his smile around the locker room. Just a shame. Just a shame. So, that's really the crux of the Sabres news for now. We're in that weird calm before the storm, the night before Christmas period of the NHL, because it is when you wake up on Monday, everything's about to go down. You've got Game 7 of the Cup Final on Monday. Tuesday and Wednesday, you're probably going to get loads and loads and loads of rumors and probably trades as well leading up to the draft. Then on Thursday, you're going to get the buyout window opens. You're going to get your Skinner news most likely. Friday's the NHL draft. Saturday's day 2. And then Sunday's the last day before free agency. Or Sunday's the last day before free agency. And then Monday's free agency. So everything is about to happen at once. And it's gonna be tough to keep up with, but should be a fun week.
Resign Stamkos.
So why don't we get into possibly the most unbelievable Stanley Cup final that we might ever be alive for? Game 7's tomorrow night on Monday, and a week ago, or in about a week ago's time, the Panthers were up 3-0.
I went from talking to people saying that it's the most boring final I've ever seen. And then I had no interest in watching game four to now being on the edge of my seat and very excited to watch tomorrow night.
You know, I think if you watch those first three games and you knew Edmonton deserved better. Even the most optimistic Edmonton fan would probably tell you that two out of those three games they absolutely deserved to win. But obviously Florida went up 3-0, and man, has the tide really shifted? Blowing them out in Game 4, Game 5, Florida almost coming back, but the Edmonton lead was too great, and McDavid was on another level. And then Game 6, McDavid didn't even have a point, and Edmonton still won. Crazy. Just it's turned into a crazy Stanley Cup final.
It's the depth that they've always needed and lacked, and the fact that it's finally showing up and they waited this long to wake up while their backs are against the wall. It's just incredible.
And good goaltending. Stuart Skinner has not killed them these last three games, which he did the first three.
His stats in games 4 through 7 beforehand are just absolutely ridiculous to look at, considering that it's Stuart Skinner and the performances that he put on in other games. It's really hard to believe looking at it, but it's also very fun to watch at this point. So I'm hoping that he shows up again tomorrow night.
And if you look at the Florida Panthers, first of all, their GM Bill Zito he's losing it on a nightly basis. He looks like he wants to castrate that entire roster.
How could you not?
Seriously, like you went from probably being hailed as one of the best teams of the modern era. Now you're going to be looked at as possibly probably the greatest chokers in NHL history, and I don't know, your roster, suddenly you don't look like such a great GM anymore.
Maybe the best part of all of this was an interview with Matthew Tkachuk that I saw on Twitter before Game 6, where he said they're very comfortable with the position that they're in, and they're very happy, and that they're excited to keep going. And it's like, it's not how they're looking. He looks shell-shocked. Barkov's really their only forward that is still producing, and it's that the 180 is just nuts.
What did you think? Did you think that goal was onside the other night? The Barkov. Speaking of the Barkov goal, it's so dumb, man. The fact that you have to like scale it up 1,000%. I'll say this: I didn't think they had enough to overturn it, and who knows how the game goes from there.
It's really tough when it takes that long and you have to zoom in that much, and it just brings into question like how natural, like how the game's supposed to be played, and how video is just changing the game, and all these video replays that they can bring up, and all the offside challenges, and just everything just affecting a game that big for Florida, where they feel that if that goes the other way, then they might be lifting the cup.
Paul Maurice, he did let the referees have it. He was not happy with that.
He's very animated and vocal when he gets upset. It's fun.
He went full tomato. I know there's an extra layer of hatred there just because you are a Tampa fan, and those battles of Florida series have been, tightly contested. So I know there's another layer.
I did not have a good time this year with all the goaltender interference and just load of bull crap, dude. Not saying they would have won or anything, but it gave me something to complain about while Tampa was getting smoked by them.
And that's the idea. You never want to take responsibility. You need to look for a scapegoat.
Yeah, no, it gave me something to fire back with whenever someone would give me a little something when Tampa was just getting rinsed.
So I have to ask, do you think the Oilers are going to do it?
I do.
You think 100%. They're going to? Do you think? How do you think the game's going to play out?
I could see it being similar to last game, where they'll score early, and then Florida will continue to look like they're lost and that they had it all, and now they're the ones that are empty-handed at the end of it. And to Chuck and Reinhart and Verhaeghe even just ghosting out there.
Verhaeghe's been quiet. I think he's got like 2 points in his last 8 games. I saw that being talked about today. And then, yeah, obviously Reinhart hasn't really done much. Their big guys have gone quiet, which is no
Just in time
surprise.
for Edmonton's big guys to wake up. Like Draisaitl's looking like if there wasn't McDavid, the way Draisaitl looked last game, best player in the league. Like
Hmm.
he's so crazy, and like when the playoffs come around, like he's just such a crazy player to watch and the stuff that he does. That saucer pass for the first goal, like my jaw dropped. Like he still finds a way to surprise me with the stuff that he does. And I wasn't always a fan of Draisaitl. Like I was you could probably label me as a hater, but just he's
I
coming
won't
alive,
I
man.
won't put a label on it, but that probably would be the right characterization. Yeah, it's they woke up, because it was all the media was talking about heading into Game 6 is Draisaitl's been quiet, and obviously he woke up. So not good if you're a Florida fan. If you're looking at how Game 7 is going to play out, I don't. I'm trying to go off the top of my head here. I feel like every team that has scored first has won their games this series. I want to say
That does sound right.
so. I think it either becomes an Edmonton blowout. I think like a 6-2 win, or I think if Florida scores first, they muck out like a 3-2 victory or like a 2-1. I think it's just a swing of a pendulum. Whoever scores first and just locks it down from there. Obviously, Florida needs Bobrovsky to just get out of his own head because he hasn't been himself these last few games.
Like looking at it, like changing my perspective, if Florida does pull it out, it really sucks to be Bobrovsky because I think obviously the Conn Smythe either way should go to McDavid, but all this did, if getting drawn out, is cost Bobrovsky the Conn Smythe, which really sucks for him.
He probably would have gotten it as much as McDavid deserved it, no matter what. If they close it out in Game 4, it was going to him 100%. And yeah, they've made him look pretty stupid the last few games. Obviously, getting yanked in Game 4, and then what 4 goals on like 20 shots the other night. So, how about Connor McDavid? We really haven't touched on him. If he does this, is this the most? It's got to be one of the most impressive runs ever by a player. Like I can't think of one better whose name isn't Wayne Gretzky or Mario Lemieux.
I mean, it's really hard to argue against it. As biased as I try to be in my arguments sometimes, like Kucherov had a couple crazy playoff runs where he just lit it up and put up insane amounts of points. But I can't even talk about that anymore with what McDavid's done this year. Like it's not even in the same conversation. He's just on another level, and it makes it hard to be biased anymore.
Just out of curiosity, I was looking at because right now he's I think at 42 points in the playoffs, which A is ridiculous. Um, and B, I was looking at just like where he would rank on the Sabres. He would already be their sixth leading point scorer for the regular season, just with his playoff numbers. And if he gets 3 points, I think he'll be the San Jose Sharks' second leading scorer, just with his playoff numbers.
And there was another video I saw. I think it was a Leafs podcast or something, and they were going off because he's 7, 8 points away from being the leading playoff point scorer just in this postseason alone, compared to their entire
Yeah,
core superstars.
yeah, he's already like closing in on Matthews and Nylander. I think he's like right there with Marner as well. It's ridiculous.
You can't help but laugh.
It's funny. Like it's funny. He's for me. He's the best. He's the most talented player to ever touch a hockey stick. Um, like, did you see the other stat? Like he's 5 assists, I think, behind Patrick Kane all time for playoffs. And that's
What
Patrick Kane. Like Patrick Kane is going to be a Hall of Famer because of his playoff numbers. Patrick Kane didn't have a 100-point season until after he won 3 Stanley Cups. McDavid is 5 points or assists behind him with 72 less games played. Like, it's video game numbers.
it shouldn't be possible.
It's it's funny. I have a story about this. My coworker who we were just talking at work the other day, just about how this is like the worst time for sports in the year. The NBA's done. There's no NFL, and it's just basically middle of the regular season baseball.
Don't forget the Euros, man. Show soccer some love,
Shout out
right?
Euros. And he and I was like, well, at least you still got the Cup final going on, which is cool. And he's not a hockey guy, so he's like, I don't know how the conversation got turned to this, but he's just like, who's the best player? Who do I think is the best player in the world? And I just laugh and I'm like, it's Connor McDavid. And he's like, oh, really? Like, I don't know much about him. So I proceeded to spend the next like 20 minutes telling him how ridiculous he is at the sport, but which was mostly based off of this playoff run. Like, he has 42 points, and I think Tkachuk leads the Panthers with like 22, or maybe Barkov passed him. Like, just video game stuff. It's going to be crazy to think about in like 20 years when we're just looking back on this era. This isn't even his best playoff run, arguably. He was at a higher level 2 years ago. He was at like 2 points per game.
And like the fact that he could just do this all again next year too. Like, what's going to stop him from doing this again?
I mean, 2 years ago, he was like, oh, I want to score more this year. And he scored, 70 goals? And then this year, he's like, maybe I'll just pass the puck more. And he has 100 assists. He can just will whatever hockey season he wants into existence. Stupid stuff. If the Oilers do it, it's the most impressive run for a single player. I mean, definitely that I've ever watched, and I would argue ever.
Hands down.
But we shall see. It makes for good cinema, and it's something that hasn't been done since World War II.
Good stat.
So no matter what, it's gonna be hopefully Game 7's entertaining. I hope it goes a lot better than it did in 2011, where it was a very low key blowout by the Bruins against the Canucks, and it led to riots in the streets. So moving on to the wider NHL, which has been very active. I feel like teams are very anxious to jump to all the off-season stuff because the Cup final just won't end, and the layoff between games has been annoyingly long. There's been a lot of stuff that's happened, and we'll start off with the big one. So somehow, some way, Rob Blake of the LA Kings got someone to take on the entirety of the Pierre-Luc Dubois contract. Pierre-Luc Dubois got traded to the Washington Capitals 1-for-1, a good old Bob McKenzie special, for Darcy Kuemper, straight up, no strings attached, no salary retention, no picks, no nothing. Pierre-Luc Dubois lasted 1 season in LA and gets traded to Washington for Darcy Kuemper.
Hopefully Dubois finally finds a home, because it feels like he's on a new team every 2 to 3 years now.
Yeah, that's I mean, look, I get it. He's only 25 and he's had good seasons in the past, but man, I cannot believe they got out of that contract. I mean, over $8 million for 7 more seasons. And oh my God, crazy. I don't know what Washington thinks they're doing, whether they think this is a win. I mean, they have to think it's a win now move, but I don't know. I mean, like you said, maybe he somehow figures it out. Maybe his cancerous attitude doesn't carry over to Washington for the first time in his career.
But also, checking, good friend of the show, Cap Friendly, this seems to put them in a lot of trouble, where they have a very slim amount of cap left after this move.
Which is interesting you bring up. I'll let you finish your thought.
Well, I just don't know if this then makes them feel like they have to move on from another contract, which I picked Strome or possibly Tom Wilson, which I can't even see happening. But those are the only 2 guys that are making enough money that they could move to free up any sort of cap that they could.
I mean, I know we just witnessed the Dubois contract get moved, but if somebody takes on the Tom Wilson contract, that might be the most baffling uh, move in recent memory. But you bring up a good point because this was where a lot of theories were coming in on the Sabre side of things. Now they have 5 centers. They have Dylan Strome, Pierre-Luc Dubois now, and then Connor McMichael and Hendrix Lapierre, and then Nick Dowd. So something has to give there. A domino has to fall, and according to Chad Diamonisis of Expected Buffalo, we should keep our eyes on Buffalo and Washington, that there might be something there, and it seems like Nick Dowd might be the guy. 34 years old, $1.3 million. He'll be making that next season, and then in the season after that, he's a UFA, pure shutdown center. Kind of lines up what we've been thinking the Sabres are going to chase after. Maybe he can be a 3C, but kind of has always slotted in as Washington's 4C. So if that's the move that the Sabres do end up chasing after, it'll be interesting to see what the domino effect is there. Do they see maybe giving Krebs another shot at 3C, or is he trade bait? Who knows? It'll be if that domino falls, it'll be interesting to see.
I just know that I'll be looking forward to another Twitter video of the shift where Dubois just gliding around and looking like he's got other places to be than on the ice in the NHL.
Yeah,
that's one of my
if that
favorite
shift,
videos.
like if that video doesn't sum up his career, like I don't know what else does. It's one of those perfect moments. You
can't help but feel for him playing for Tortorella.
I don't have to feel for him. That's he's it's funny, and I'm
trying to give the guy something.
I get Tortorella's not the greatest coach, but it's definitely it was funny. It was funny. So yeah, that's by far the craziest trade that has already kicked off this sort of off season, and then that same day we get another move. Jacob Markstrom finally gets traded to the New Jersey Devils after months and months of speculation. He goes at 30% retention for a 2025 top 10 protected first round pick and Kevin Ball. So from the Devils side of things, they finally get their starting goaltender, something that if they would have addressed last offseason, Lindy Ruff would probably still have a job there. And B, their starting tandem now is Jacob Markstrom and Jake Allen for $6 million. That's pretty good.
You could have worse situations than that.
Yeah. New Jersey finally gets their guy, and and Markstrom's been pegged for New Jersey for, I think, might have been dating back to last summer now. So they finally get that domino to fall, and then on Calgary side of things, it's interesting because the return looks a bit light, especially given they retained salary. But Kevin Ball being the one to go back, who has basically slotted in as their third pair defenseman, kind of like a Samuelson type role, or a Samuelson type skill set, big guy, who's more of a shutdown caliber type of player. But not a more high upside. They weren't able to drag the 10th overall pick out of them, or a prospect like Alex Holtz. I guess it's lighter at first look, and I can see why a lot of people probably, consensus is probably they lost the trade.
Yeah, just on the outside looking in, it just seems like another depth defenseman going to Calgary, and that's not exactly a hole that they desperately needed filled.
No, you bring up a good point. Like their blue line is seemingly kind of full of people like Ball or at least recent acquisitions. But yeah, it's unfortunately Markstrom did have a no move clause, so he decided where he was going. So I guess to get a young defenseman and get a first round pick, it's not terrible business by Craig Conroy, but obviously it's probably not the return they wanted initially. especially given Markstrom has been very good in recent seasons. So, in my mind, that's a big win for the Devils. I guess that's bad news for the Sabres as well. Um, Another pretty big domino to fall early in the offseason. So, with Markstrom gone, there had been obviously, given a player of his talent, there were other teams involved. I think Toronto was said to be around him, and additionally, I think Ottawa. But that Ottawa train of thought is interesting because with Markstrom gone, now they've seemingly they've set their sights on another goaltender, Linus Ullmark. He might be coming back to the Atlantic. It seems it's been reported by a few outlets that that's Ottawa's guy. Their goaltending this past season with Jonas Korpisalo and Anton Forsberg was atrocious. And it's really unfortunate in the case of Korpisalo because they just signed him to a 5-year deal. They had to address it somehow, and Ullmark is seemingly the guy that they're setting their sights on.
It is weird to see Korpisalo kind of flop, given that his potential in the NHL games was always very good. He was always someone I would target to pick up when I was rebuilding a team. And watching it play out where he's not the guy that EA Sports thought he was is definitely a head turner. But
I do have a question, and this is very special because you are a Tampa fan. Do you think he got that contract, and B, he's still like kind of widely regarded as potentially a good goaltender because of that bubble game? Is he still living off that 6 overtime game?
It had to factor in. Like, that game was so crazy to watch, and just hearing all the stats from it for the rest of the playoff run nonstop of how good Korpisalo was in that game, that I feel like that had to be fresh in the mind still 2 years later, given that I still remember the announcers bringing it up in the final that Korpisalo had like 80-something saves.
It's a ridiculous performance, but yeah, it's every time he's brought up, it's seemingly like the first thing that gets placed next to him, like, oh, he was amazing in the bubble a few years ago. Well,
then like, Braden Point said game over, but
then sorry, it's like, but then it's like, okay, but that was, I mean, it's crazy to think about. It's been 4 years since then, and he has not been good. Obviously, Columbus and Ottawa aren't the greatest of situations, but
didn't Elvis take his spot? I forget.
I guess you could say take his spot. They've both been like equally bad. Speaking of Elvis, did you see what their Don Waddell said the other day?
Dude, Columbus, man.
I still haven't looked, but like, did he say that out loud? Like,
I didn't fact check it either, but
like, yeah, nobody's trading for that contract. It's like, damn, bro, Elvis is catching strays.
He's still around, man.
It's just an incredible. Like, imagine Kevin Adams just came out and said that Jeff Skinner contract. Yeah, no, we tried to trade it. Nobody wants that.
First interview after the buyout, he just rips it to shreds.
This is a great day for our organization. To get back to Ullmark, though, 1 year left, $5 million. You would conceivably think that this comes in with an extension, but it's almost similar to Korpisalo in that if Ullmark goes to Ottawa, that season he had with Boston 2 years ago, I feel like that's going to be a pretty big factor into potentially keeping him around. I feel like an extension's going to be pretty pricey. You would think he gets a raise. So something to keep an eye on as we approach the draft. Ottawa has been another team whose pick has supposedly been on the table. So I don't know. It would be crazy to see them potentially end up moving that for a goalie. I don't know. We'll see. Ullmark might be on his way back to the Atlantic. Moving on, we did get a big extension in the NHL sphere. Filip Hronek got a massive 8-year by 7.25 average annual value extension for the Canucks. So he's staying in Vancouver. Obviously, he had probably one of the best seasons of his career, playing alongside Quinn Hughes, basically attached to each other's hip for the entirety of the season. Obviously, he did sort of not have the greatest playoffs ever. Did he end up getting a point? I know he was scoreless through like the first round and a half. I don't know if he ended up getting like a secondary assist, but he gets his massive extension in Vancouver.
Well, any points that he lacked were picked up by Nikita Zadorov, which I feel that has he ever really been like a huge offensive guy? I
Absolutely
think
not.
he's
Well, Hronek or
definitely more
Zadorov?
Hronek.
I mean, yeah, kind of in the recent seasons, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I feel like he had a decent amount. I mean, Quinn Hughes was feeding him all
That's
year,
what when
so
you're running with Quinn Hughes, especially in the playoffs, I feel like with how offensive he is, that kind of makes him shift into more of a
yeah,
defensive, stay home
he.
kind of guy.
I guess he's never scored a ton. The most he's had in a season is 9, and he had 5 this season. But he did have 48 points in 81 games. But he had 1 goal, 1 assist in 13 games this past playoffs. So not great, not great.
I feel like this could definitely turn into a very good contract, though. I don't think that they overpaid that much at all, especially with the cap going up.
I don't love it, but I do agree with the cap going up. And there was talk of him getting 8 at one point, which I think would have been really bad. But keeping it at 7.25, they probably had to hand out extra term to get it there. But yeah, I mean, $7 million in a few years' time, that's probably going to be second pair of money. And that's basically the type of player he is. He's probably a second pair type guy, but he's playing up with Quinn Hughes. So as long as he carries his load with Quinn, it doesn't slow him down. Can't really hate that deal, I suppose.
And going off of our friends cap friendly, they're projected $16 million in cap space still after this contract. And looking at who they have, all the star guys still have a contract for next season.
Yeah,
Besides
obviously.
Elias Lindholm, who just lost his mind. But
What I think at one point, he definitely rejected a 7.7 by 7 recently. I think he rejected like a 7 or an 8 by 8 recently as well. So I don't know what his agent is telling him, but yeah, that's probably their only big loss. Obviously, Dakota Joshua is probably the other big one that he's probably going to get a pretty big payday on on the open market. So
they
and
definitely need to bring back Zadorov,
yeah,
though.
we'll
I
see.
saw
Yeah,
that
we'll
he
see.
needs a
As
contract.
Zadorov was probably the MVP of their playoffs, so we'll see. We'll see if they're able to get him locked down. So wrapping things up here, we're back to Arizona, which is weird because we thought we'd said goodbye for a little while, but inevitably they were due to embarrass themselves publicly somehow. Um, the Arizona State Land Department has canceled the land auction for where the new arena, once Arizona returned later this decade, was going to go. So, as of right now, I don't think Arizona has a plan to get back into the NHL with a new arena.
I haven't totally been following it. Was the plan to move Utah back, or were they going to add more expansion teams?
So here's what happened. Arizona ownership is among the worst in sports,
Naturally.
but the NHL couldn't convince them to essentially leave. They couldn't convince them under the premise that they probably weren't going to get a team back. What they had to do was tell the owner, like, okay, if you move them now, we'll give you another shot. We'll give you an expansion team later this decade. So basically, the idea was they were going to give them 5 years to essentially figure their shit out, and then we'd meet again, and hopefully everything would be much smoother. Um, that's why they ended up going to Utah. That's why their owner Alex Marullo signed off on it. Basically, they don't. I don't think Bettman. I don't think likes this guy, and I don't think any of the owners do because he's cost them a lot of money and a lot of bad PR. So now we're at the point where I'll just read off the Arizona Coyotes statement that they released. To Today, after over a year of planning and meeting every obligation required under Arizona law, the Arizona State Land Department unilaterally canceled the auction that was scheduled to occur on June 27th for the site that has been identified as the future home of the Arizona Coyotes. This unprecedented action by the state of Arizona seriously jeopardizes the future of NHL hockey returning to the desert. Basically, later in the statement, Arizona goes on to say that the Arizona Coyotes are exploring all of our legal options given this short-sighted decision by the state. So that's where their arena was supposed to go for when they got an expansion team. And as of right now, there's no longer an auction for it.
First off, I feel sorry for anyone in Arizona who was a fan of this team.
Terrible.
But building off of that, is anybody outside of Arizona losing sleep over this? Like,
I mean, probably not.
They played at a college campus this year.
But it's just terrible ownership because it's, I don't know, in any other sport, Arizona is not like this. I mean, I guess, like the Cardinals are pretty bad right now, but like you look at any other sport, like they're a city that's been successful, and in the NHL, they're just kind of looked at as a ghost, just an afterthought. So it sucks to see. It sucks to see that Marullo and his team just continue to fumble the bag.
Guess it's just roll Utah Yeti, man.
It's the man. No, we're hoping for Mammoth here, at least in my mind. I don't know if Chris and I got the chance to talk about it on here, but did you see the release of their new jerseys, the Utah jerseys?
I did. They look very basic for what they are, but I feel like they could have been a lot worse at the same time.
They could have. You know how I feel about black bases on jerseys. Not a fan. I think they're very boring. I thought they should have gone baby blue for the home jerseys. But anyways, I think they're fine. That basically wraps up everything that's happened. Essentially, like I said, it's about to ramp up super quick. I mean, there's tons of rumors flying around. Supposedly, Ottawa and Philadelphia have a deal potentially for possibly a draft pick swap. The Sabres and Flyers have supposedly been talking, and Peyton Krebs has been thrown into that discussion. There's just so much that's about to happen. It's going to be fun to monitor after the cup gets lifted tomorrow night.
Are we getting rid of my game here, or are we playing that?
Absolutely not.
All right.
I just thought I had fun talking NHL hockey with you. So Jesse did come with, he wanted to put his own spin on things for this episode.
I was very excited when I was asked to do this, and I kind of wanted to put my own spin on it at the end. So what I've done is I've put together 4 career paths based on teams that these players have played for, and we're going to test Jonah's puck knowledge. He talks all this hockey, and we're gonna see if he knows what he's talking about.
So break down how this is gonna work super quick.
So I'm basically gonna list in order every team that this player's played for, and then I have written in 1 hint if he needs it. All right. We're just gonna see if he can guess it. So, and it does go from easiest to hardest. So if you get this one right off the bat, don't get too excited.
Naturally.
All right, so for the first one, he was drafted by the Buffalo Sabres. He then moved to the Islanders, Canadiens, Wild, Red Wings, Panthers, Canucks, Blue Jackets, and retired with the Red Wings.
He retired with the Red Wings. Ooh, I wonder who this is. Is this Thomas Vanek?
This is absolutely one of the greatest Sabres player to ever live, Thomas Vanek, yes. Very well done. I just wanted to include him because of how long his career path is. Looking at it, it's pretty nuts.
You did almost throw me for a loop because I totally forgot he played for the Canadiens.
Yeah, for like half a year.
Yeah.
And
I think
fun
it was the
fact
same
about
season. I think he got traded to the Islanders, the Matt Molson trade. And I think he got flipped to the Canadiens that same season.
I think it was. And then fun fact of his time in Vancouver, he has a goal against Andrei Vasilevsky in an NHL game, which is nuts. But all right. So the second one, This player was drafted by the LA Kings, then moved to the Flyers, Predators, Devils, Sabres, and retired in Toronto.
Retired in Toronto. Could you state that path one more time?
I sure can. Drafted by the LA Kings,
Mm-hmm.
then moved to the Philadelphia Flyers, Nashville Predators, New Jersey Devils, Buffalo Sabres, and retired in Toronto.
Okay. I think I might need the hint for this one.
So the hint is that he only played 7 games for the Buffalo Sabres.
Oh, that's a good one. Wayne the Train Simmons.
The Wayne train. 2 for 2. Only needed one hint too.
Feeling good?
He's feeling good. All right. We'll see if you're still feeling good after this one. So the third one, he was also drafted by the LA Kings. He then moved to the Buffalo Sabres, Montreal Canadiens, Anaheim Ducks, Minnesota Wild, and he's currently playing on the Philadelphia Flyers.
He's currently on the Philadelphia Flyers. Could you state that path one more time?
I sure can. Drafted by the LA Kings, Buffalo Sabres, Montreal Canadiens, Anaheim Ducks, Minnesota Wild, and currently playing on Philadelphia.
He's currently on the Flyers. I guess I feel like I don't know the Flyers roster that well.
To be fair, I did not know this guy was still in the league.
Is he still is he playing NHL games?
I believe he played last season. I could fact check it.
Am I allowed to look at rosters or is this off the cuff?
I feel like it would make it obvious.
Okay.
It's your show, so if you want to,
no, I'm
not going to stop you.
I will not pull an executive order like that.
He did play 60 games in the 23-24 season, yeah.
Played 60 games. So he went from the Kings to the Sabres, played for the Wild as well. He played this season. I feel like somebody's definitely yelling at the radio right now. It's someone obvious.
There is the hint if you want it.
I feel like I shouldn't need this. If he's still playing, I feel like I should know who it is. Kings to the Sabres. Oh, is this Nicolas Delorier?
It is. It is Nick Delorier.
That's right. I was like, what Kings trade? I'm like, oh, that's right. We traded 2 second-round picks for the guy.
So my hint was that he has more penalty minutes than career games played. Didn't know if that would help or not, but I thought that was funny stuff.
That's a good pull.
All right, so the last one. I know I would never get this, so I thought it would be the hardest one. I'm not sure how up you are. You're probably a lot more knowledgeable than I am, but let's see how this one goes.
I was hitting puck doku pretty hard last summer.
So, yeah. This player was drafted by the Toronto Maple Leafs, moved to the San Jose Sharks, the Boston Bruins, the St. Louis Blues, the Buffalo Sabres, the New York Islanders, Florida Panthers, and retired back with the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Oh, man. One more time, please.
So drafted by Toronto.
Drafted by Toronto.
San Jose.
Okay.
Boston. St. Louis. Buffalo. The Islanders. Florida. And retired back with the Toronto Maple Leafs.
So he went from St. Louis to Buffalo, and then from Buffalo to Florida.
And this is not Tage Thompson.
You know what? Just because it's the last one, give me the hint.
The hint is that he spent 2 seasons with the Sabres, and they were the 2010-11 season and the 2011-12 season.
So that's why. That's why this was not ringing a bell. So he went from the Blues.
It's a very niche name.
Very niche.
Like it's a name that I definitely once knew very well. But when I saw his name, I was like, I have to include him because I would never think of this guy.
Is this Jordan Leopold?
It is not.
I think he played for St. Louis. 2010. So he only played 2 years. They went to the playoffs. Both those. Wait, was this 10-11 and 11-12?
10-11 and 11-12.
Okay, so he played the following season when they missed. Man, one hint. That's tough.
I could try to craft another one if you want.
Give me a position.
He was a forward.
He was a forward. Okay. 2 years. Played on the playoff. He played on the playoff. Oh, is this Brad Boyes?
It is Brad
There
Boyes.
it is. Yes. I was the Blues connection finally clicked. I forgot. Fun fact, he was the last player to score a playoff goal for the Sabres.
I Googled niche Sabres players, and I just ended up with a
And
list of every player
he's
that ever
the
played
first
for
one
the
that popped
Sabres.
up. Brad Boyes is the marquee niche Buffalo
And
Sabre.
yeah, so I just ended up with a list of every single Sabres player ever. And I was just scrolling through it and I saw him and because I was kind of
That's a
looking
good
for
one.
guys
That's a
that
good one.
played for like 5, 6 ish. And he had just a long list. And I was like, this would be a good one.
Yeah, it's not. I don't hate that. I don't hate this idea, this game. I'll have you.
Did you want the Thomas Vanek,
What was the
even
Thomas
though you
Vanek
didn't
hint?
need it? That he was a Sabres captain. I think that would have given it away, but
For like 2 months.
only in away games.
That's right. He did split with Steve Ott.
Steve Ott, man. I was so mad when they wouldn't just give it to him.
That was fun. I enjoyed that. I hope all the listeners enjoyed that too.
I really hope the listeners enjoyed it as well.
It's a throwback to when we did Sabres trivia at the end of every episode.
I mean, I could come up with other games if I
You
ever
could.
get the
You
invite
could.
back.
You know, we do have a yearly Jeopardy episode. And we haven't really settled on a host yet.
You know, I actually hosted a fair share of Jeopardy games for my family when we were in COVID, so I definitely
Really?
know how to do it.
Okay. Well, keep your eyes on your phone. You might be called upon in the future.
That's exciting.
But no, that was fun. Thank you for joining me, Jesse. I hope I had a blast. I hope you had fun coming on.
I definitely appreciated the invite, man. I was very nervous coming in, and I hope that didn't come across too much, but by now I'm locked in and I'm ready to do a whole nother episode.
Well, hopefully JP doesn't pass any of his CPA exams come up, and hopefully Christian remains out of town in future weekends.
What kind of guy goes to school for accounting, man?
Because then you can come on anytime that you wish.
Dude, Christian's never getting this equipment back.
All right, folks, that's going to do it for this episode. Like I said, calm before the storm. Everything's about to ramp up super quickly. My guess is Christian, JP, and I will do our draft live reactions next Friday. I think that'll be our next episode. And then, yeah, free agency right after. And hopefully we get some new faces on this roster pretty soon. It's an exciting time. So, Jesse, once again, thank you very much for coming on. It was
Go Sabres.
And as the man said, go Sabres. If you want to follow us on Twitter, follow us at the Sabre Report. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the Sabre Report. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Thank you very much for watching and or listening. If you want updates for the pod, follow us at Sabre Report Pod. Go give our friends over at the Buffalo Sports Talk podcast a listen. They have actually a pretty big interview, it sounds like, coming up with a Bills player, potentially. I don't want to ruin the surprise, though, so stay tuned for that. And Jesse, is there anything you would like to plug?
Not really. I have my own.
You did mention the Euros. Did you maybe want to plug your Tottenham?
Dude, I run an American Tottenham Twitter where I tweet maybe. I try to tweet every game, but most of the times I end up watching the game on my phone, so it's very hard to keep up with. But I've been tweeting during the Euros. It's at American Spur 11. I have 2 tweets for the Euros, and that's it. So if you like a guy tweeting about a sport that he knows just enough about to look like he belongs, then give that a follow. But and the U.S. men's team won today, so watch out for them in the Copa, man.
Look out.
LeBron James of soccer, man. Does it again.
So that's going to do it for this one. Thank you very much for listening. Feel free to leave a review. And as the man said, Go Sabres.
Shout out Ben Nymul.